Without great drinks, there would not be great authors.
Well, Zev, I would argue that without great authors, there wouldn't be great drinks. I want to raise a glass to 4 books from the Prohibition era and pour over their intoxicating connections to the spirits and cocktails of the time. I thought we'd start with talking about The Great Gatsby.
Fantastic.
When you think of The Great Gatsby, you think immediately of the Jazz Age and of Cugat's jacket. But you also have to think about bootlegging, Jay Gatsby, and Tom Buchanan's excessive drinking, and mint juleps and champagne cocktails and gin rickeys. Can you tell us a bit about a gin rickey?
Fortunately, we have a bottle of gin from a little bit before Prohibition. We don't have the exact dates, but it's a fun little tipple, and obviously gin, which is quite easier to make than whiskey, was a little bit more available, so thus it was flowing a little bit more copiously. And actually, this is a fun bottle being auctioned soon in our sales, not the open one, of course.
Drinking is a central theme of the book. You can't think about it, you know, the kind of narrative without thinking about drinking, either bringing people together or isolating people from each other. You know, Tom Buchanan drinks so much that he becomes violent. But then there is also a glamour of drinking. It's not all kind of bad and, you know, excessive. Fitzgerald writes really beautifully about the parties. For example, he says, "In his blue gardens, men and girls came and went like moths among the whisperings and the champagne and the stars." So
Whimsical.
very whimsical, very evocative, and it's that dreamlike atmosphere that permeates across his parties.
Talking about dreamlike, gin rickey, although it is the middle of January, this was a quite refreshing, easy Collins style drink. I'm actually gonna lead this off with a squirt of lime and then just a touch of simple syrup just to sweeten it up. Although, you know, we tried this gin and it did have sweetness already.
Super sweet,
So
yeah.
I'm just gonna add a little bit of gin here as well.
What's the bathtub gin? Were they made in bathtubs?
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe bathing in gin?
so this would be during Prohibition era. They'd just be making gin wherever they could. We'll top it off with a little bit of soda water.
Is that to get it all fizzed up?
Bubbles are refreshing, and that's what we're aiming for here. Whoa.
Thank you so much.
There you are. A little cheers to the gin rickey
Cheers.
and to the Gatsby era. Yeah, you can definitely understand why they threw these back. Low effort, high reward.
Well, cocktails really came into their own in this era.
A lot of cocktails did. Singapore Sling is one of them. Martinis were always flowing. French 75s. So a lot of the cocktails are also switchable in terms of spirit. You'd easily make this with whiskey, and whiskey was king back then and still is today. But due to Prohibition era, which started in 1920, which ran to early 1933, you couldn't have it.
Yeah.
It was made or smuggled. There was bootlegging. I know bootlegging was definitely part of a lot of the books mentioned here, and
Yeah.
it shaped America as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's the shock twist in
Right.
Gatsby, is that he's a dirty bootlegger, which seems kind of ironic because these books that we've got here, they're all bar one were written during Prohibition, and yet drinking is one of the central themes, if not the central theme of them. So tell me about this bottle. Is this what the characters in Gatsby would have been drinking from?
Maybe not enjoying this brand specifically, maybe they were, because I know they're based in New York. The distillery is based in Philadelphia, so not so far. I mean, this bottle is roughly 110 years old, or we don't know specifically, but it's at least 100 years old.
It isn't looking too bad for being 110 years old.
Yeah. We unearthed 2 cases of this gin and opened it. Like, the consignor never knew, we never knew what was inside, and yeah, now we're selling it at auction.
So they hadn't been opened since they were bottled.
Ever. Yeah.
Wow.
And the bottles all came in different shapes and sizes. We assumed they just kind of used whatever glass that they had. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
And you've tasted it. It's extraordinary for what it is.
Because you hear about whiskey collecting, you don't hear about gin collecting.
We don't really sell gin, but this is an opportunity in which we actually have, from the same family, the whiskeys that they also made.
Wow.
So we're selling, along with the gin, we're selling the blended whiskey they made, and also, I believe, like, the father of the family has a rye that was done in 1898.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it's quite cool, and we wanted to keep the lineage alive and sell what was available from the same consignor.
So the next book I'd love to talk about is Death in the Afternoon by Hemingway. It was published in 1932. And it takes place in Paris, in Spain, and it talks a lot about the kind of drinking culture of expats living in those cities. We have an amazing inscribed copy that Hemingway has given as a gift to one of his wife's former roommates. And it says, "To Eleanor, remembering aperitifs and a confused itinerary at Le Deux Magots." And that was a Parisian bar, cafe, where all the kind of writers and artists and creatives of 1920s Paris would meet and exchange ideas. Gertrude Stein, Fitzgerald, Hemingway, etc.
Well, the death in the afternoon, the cocktail is champagne, probably ideally, and some absinthe. So that's what they were drinking in the afternoon as well. I mean, sure, the first one will wake you up, but I think by the third or fourth, they're having 5 or 6. You're feeling that absolute having death in the afternoon.
I think what Hemingway said about this cocktail is drink 3 to 5 of them slowly. A lot of the book is talking about bullfighting, and it's talking about how the kind of whole ritual of bullfighting would be infused with drinking. You drink before, you drink during, you drink after. It was kind of part of the like ritual cleansing almost of a bullfight experience for the viewer and for the fighter. There's a lot of bars that Hemingway would frequent in Madrid where he'd drink sherry and manzanilla and brandy and cognac and probably lots of other things as well. Hemingway is a famous drinker, and his books are, constantly referencing drinking. It's in many different ways. It kind of drives the narrative of so many of his books.
Americans had an appetite for all of this, especially since going overseas for the war.
But the quote, "write drunk, edit sober," is always kind of attributed to Hemingway, but actually he advised on sobriety when he was writing. And he
It's
said,
represented.
Exactly. And he said that you can tell halfway through a sentence when Faulkner's had his first drink.
So what era was this book made?
So this was published in 1932.
It's funny you should say that, because we have a bottle right here that was bottled in 1929, and it's quite rare to have bottles bottled in 1929 because it's during Prohibition. How did that happen?
Yeah.
They're labeled as medicinal. And so
Clever.
the only formal way of being able to drink is an ailment.
Well, somebody's got to take the rap. The only evidence they have is those 12 cases of Old Century.
Let's go to San Francisco and have a very kind of different setting, but the same era. It's The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. And it's a very different context. It's kind of hard-boiled detective fiction. The Sam Spade, the titular character, drinks whiskey basically throughout the novel, and it's kind of to calm his nerves as he's unpacking these very complex cases. He mentions drinking a glass of Scotch whiskey, drinking a glass of rye whiskey, and this again is 1930, so it's right in the middle of Prohibition, and yet all the characters are drinking. So how does Prohibition compare from kind of east to west coasts?
I would say it didn't change that much. America was dealing with it as a whole, as we would, which is a lot of bootlegging, a lot of finding ways to still procure. Pints were prescribed, but also they're quite convenient. They can be placed inside jackets. It's easier to transport 24 of these than it is 12 of these, right? So hidden passages, speakeasies, yeah, you name it. We were making it all work no matter what.
And I thought it's interesting that in Great Gatsby, they're drinking cocktails and it's kind of light and bubbly and it reflects the atmosphere of the book. In this very noir detective novel, it's a lot of harder liquor, whiskey, neat, or maybe on the rocks, and it's interesting how alcohol is used to kind of set a certain tone in all these different books.
Yeah, I still think we have that today where you're sitting in a big leather chair, sipping some whiskey, and that kind of emanates this darkness to it. But really, that's a relaxing moment for me.
The Maltese Falcon has this incredibly eye-catching yellow jacket, and it's one of the preeminent books of kind of hard-boiled detective fiction. And Hammett actually was a detective himself, and that's where he got a lot of the content for his books.
But he was drinking whiskey during Prohibition, right?
I guess he was.
Yeah, that just shows that people were still drinking no matter
Yeah.
what level of law or citizen you were.
Very bad. The next book we're going to talk about is The Sun Also Rises, which is by Hemingway again, published in 1926. And it's about the lost generation, people living in cold, harsh, post-war environment who are searching for meaning. And it's all about existentialism and coming together to find meaning, but also escape. And a lot of that is done with the aid of drinking. Speaking of which.
Right, yeah. So this is something that will definitely get you through it. What I'm gonna make today is a French 75, which is a sour royale. So essentially it's a lemon, sugar, and gin-based drink topped with champagne.
Yum.
So, you know, just 2 ounces of this wonderful 1900s gin just going right into a shaker over ice. Look, I think if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it. And I'm pretty excited to make this happen.
Is this blasphemous, mixing a gin of this age?
It really depends on how you look at it, but yes. Yeah, this isn't the greatest move.
It's research. Yeah, it's research.
Exactly. A little bit of lemon.
I love a sour cocktail. Whiskey sour is probably my favorite cocktail.
Oh, this is just a little bit lighter, a little bit easier to make.
You've done this before.
You know, it's been a while, I'm a little rusty, but I felt good.
I could never get these. I used to work in a bar. I could never get those to part. I'd kind of have to like whack them over my leg.
Oh yeah, it's all about, there's a sweet spot on these. A little bit of champagne in there just to kind of keep the bubbles alive.
Beautiful.
This is such a light, easy drinking, you know.
And what era is this cocktail?
Prohibition era, pre-pro as well. This was drunk with gusto in the early 1900s.
Okay.
This was then amplified because the champagne would mask the gin as well, and you're adding sugar and lemon. You get your little lemon.
Oh, that was beautifully
I
done.
know. The lemon oils are being released. Cheers.
Cheers, thank you.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's delicious. So we've got, you know, these first issues, and these fantastic pictorial dust jackets. And I feel like dust jackets have quite a lot in common with labels, because that's, you know, they're both made of paper, and condition of labels and jackets is probably just as important sometimes as the contents of the book and the contents of the bottle.
Absolutely. If this was missing a good chunk, much like some of this is, you'd be losing a lot of information. Right underneath this says 1911. That's important information that actually adds a lot of value. Pristine labels are key to what we auction.
That seems very pristine for 1911.
It is. So this actually came from a full case of 24, and it was stored until 1930s or so. But if you look at something like this, which came out of one of the cases, yeah, I mean, this looks like it was taken to a blowtorch, but you can also just see it's just frail and hard, and you know, yeah, for books it'd be an absolute crime, but for us in whiskey and spirits, this is kind of part of what happens. You know, these are stored in humid, not great locations. So finding gems like a full case of sealed gin with pretty nice labels is a knockout for us.
And it's the same for us if we have a copy without the jacket and then a copy with the jacket. The difference in estimate is pretty astronomical. You know, it will go from being a $5,000 book without a jacket to an $100,000 book with the jacket in good condition.
Wow.
So yeah, they kind of mean everything when we're talking about modern first editions from this period.
Incredible.
It's been so nice drinking with you with these beautiful first edition books and trying alcohol from that period. It's a bit of a dream come true, I'd say.
Thank you so much for sharing these wonderful books from the same era of whiskey that we're selling in our auction. Totally marvelous and great to learn about these authors who also like to drink. So cheers to that.
Cheers.